On Sacred Spirit Mountain, the area that was once embroiled in chaotic battles had now become eerily calm and peaceful. Everyone was sitting cross-legged on the ground, continuously absorbing the golden raindrops falling from the sky. These raindrops contained a wondrous and powerful baptismal force. Although the baptismal force had become somewhat diluted after passing through the 9 heavenly steps, no one complained. They all knew that absorbing a little more of this force now might give them a better chance of survival when they later faced the 3 minor tribulations. This was a matter of life and death, and not a single person would be careless about it. As they absorbed, some cast envious glances toward the very top of the 9 heavenly steps. There, a tall, slender young figure sat quietly, almost completely submerged in radiant golden light. The vast baptismal force surrounding him made everyone jealous, but there was nothing they could do. They understood that reaching such a position required immense effort and strength, something they evidently lacked. Because of this, while they envied him, they also held some respect for the young man, who was able to sit at the top of the 9 heavenly steps with only the strength of the early heaven-reaching stage, in a place where so many powerful figures gathered. The students taught by the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy were truly formidable. It was no wonder that the academy was one of the 5 great academies. At the top of the 9 heavenly steps, Mu Chen sat quietly, his mind focused, blocking out all external distractions. Golden raindrops continued to fall around him, eventually transforming into a constant stream of baptismal force, which entered his body. At this moment, Mu Chen's body was already filled with a golden hue, even his flesh glowing faintly with golden light. A feeling of indescribable comfort rippled through his body. Although the baptismal force had not directly increased his power, he could sense that there were some remarkable changes taking place inside him. The changes were elusive, but Mu Chen understood that when the time came for him to face the 3 minor tribulations in the future, he would likely gain enormous benefits from these changes. Within his golden body, streams of golden liquid flowed through his flesh and meridians, eventually entering the Qi Sea and gathering in the small palm of his divine soul. There, golden light radiated, and the golden liquid continued to compress. Deep within, it seemed as though a golden crystal was rapidly taking shape. Buzz. As the baptismal force inside Mu Chen's body reached a certain intensity, the golden light gradually dissipated. All the golden liquid quickly compressed toward the center of the light. A buzzing sound echoed as the golden light dimmed. Then, a golden crystal, the size of a thumb, floated in the palm of his divine soul. Baptism crystal. Mu Chen's heart filled with joy upon sensing this. Only by condensing the baptism crystal could the sacred spirit baptism be considered complete. With a thought, Mu Chen's divine soul opened its mouth and gently inhaled, drawing the baptism crystal into his body. A streak of golden light passed down his divine soul's throat and finally hovered near his heart. The warm golden glow gently permeated his divine soul, refining it further. Success. At the top of the 9 heavenly steps, Mu Chen opened his eyes. In his black pupils, golden light swirled before slowly dissipating. He let out a breath of relief. Though his power hadn't drastically increased, he felt as though his body had become much lighter, as if it had been cleansed and refined. Mu Chen looked up. The sky above was still filled with the cascading golden raindrops, indicating that the baptism wasn't over yet. Mu Chen watched the scene but did not stop cultivating. With another movement of his mind, his absorption intensified. Having already condensed 1 baptism crystal, which would complete his own baptism, he now clearly had time to condense a second one. This one for Luo Li. Although he knew that, with the strength of the Luo God clan, Luo Li would certainly have a far greater chance of overcoming the 3 minor tribulations than most, Mu Chen still wanted to ensure her safety as much as possible. She had given up her cultivation in the Luo God clan to stay quietly at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy with him, and although it was something she had willingly done, Mu Chen could not be heartless. He was still too weak. Facing the mighty Luo God clan, which was even more powerful than the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, he couldn't offer much help to Luo Li. So, for now, these were the only things he could do for her. However, he also believed that one day, he would possess the strength to stand in front of Luo Li and block all the storms and rain for her. Golden raindrops filled the sky once again, gathering towards Mu Chen. The golden light condensed in his palm. Some powerful individuals saw Mu Chen's actions and could only sigh bitterly. The droughts were killing the crops, and the floods were drowning the fields. They had received only a small fraction of the baptism power, yet Mu Chen had already begun refining his second baptism crystal. It almost made their eyes pop out. But despite the frustration, no one felt unfair. There was no absolute fairness in the world. Mu Chen had reached the pinnacle with his strength, so he had the right to enjoy the most baptism power. As long as he had the ability, even if he consumed all the baptism power himself, no one could say a word. The golden raindrops in the air continued to fall gently, and after about half an hour, their intensity began to lessen. One by one, powerful individuals began to open their eyes, showing a look of regret. Clearly, they couldn't complete the baptism fully and could only absorb as much baptism power as possible to prepare for the 3 minor tribulations in the future. Xia Yuran, Shi Qinghai, and Su Buxiu also opened their eyes at this moment. Their faces couldn't hide their joy, as they had clearly refined their baptism crystals and completed the sacred spirit baptism perfectly. On the second layer, Lu Ying, Dong Yuan, and the other two had gloomy expressions. Though faint golden light surrounded their bodies, they were still far from completing the baptism. However, with the baptism nearing its end, they were helpless. They could only blame themselves for initially choosing Emo Xingtian. This waste. The three exchanged a glance, all burning with anger. They could only curse Emo Xingtian in their hearts. After all, that guy had been killed by Mu Chen, so they no longer held back. In the sky, when the final wave of baptism power fell and was absorbed into Mu Chen's palm, golden light surged in his hand, and once again, a baptism crystal was formed. Gulch. When the golden crystal appeared, a series of swallowing sounds rang out from below the 9 heavenly steps. Countless people stared intensely at Mu Chen. Mu Chen, seeing so many hungry eyes, quickly tucked the baptism crystal away. "This is for my wife. Don't get your hopes up." "Heh, congratulations," Xia Yuran said with a graceful smile, without any trace of envy. She had already completed the baptism and no longer cared about the baptism crystal. "Brother Mu Chen, thank you very much." Shi Qinghai and Su Buxiu also cupped their fists in gratitude. They knew that being able to complete the baptism this time was thanks to Mu Chen's help. Mu Chen smiled and waved his hand. Just as he was about to speak, a golden light suddenly descended from the sky. The light condensed, and the space rapidly twisted, forming a vortex. It was the exit from Sacred Spirit Mountain. Clearly, with the end of the baptism power, Sacred Spirit Mountain was about to close. Mu Chen clicked his tongue, looking at the giant light cluster floating above. Perhaps that was the greatest secret of Sacred Spirit Mountain, but unfortunately, with his current strength, he had no ability to explore it. Perhaps when he became one of the top experts in the Great Thousand Worlds, he could come back and explore it. "Let's go." Mu Chen smiled at Xia Yuran and the others, then leaped first towards the space vortex. Below, countless people also soared into the air, preparing to leave. Boom. However, just as they neared the space vortex, a violent surge of spiritual power suddenly erupted, crashing into them. The overwhelming force sent countless people flying. Some unlucky ones were tossed thousands of feet into the air, their faces turning pale as they were clearly severely injured. Mu Chen and the others reacted quickly, avoiding the brunt of the impact. However, their faces were filled with shock, and their eyes were filled with suspicion. What's going on? It seems like a supreme powerhouse is fighting outside Sacred Spirit Mountain. Xia Yuran's delicate face shifted slightly. Such intense fluctuations could only be caused by a supreme powerhouse. A supreme powerhouse is fighting? Mu Chen was momentarily stunned. Then his expression changed drastically, a sense of unease swelling in his heart. Supreme powerhouses were rare on North Song continent, and they were extremely restrained toward each other. Large-scale battles were almost impossible. If there was a conflict outside Sacred Spirit Mountain, the two most likely top forces to engage would be the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy and Dragon Demon Palace. Adding to that, Mu Chun had killed Mo Xingtian previously. Mu Chen's gaze flickered. His figure moved quickly as he rushed toward the spatial vortex, diving straight in. His face was grim, his teeth clenched. He hoped that the battle wouldn't involve Luo Li. If it did, no matter who Dragon Demon Palace was, he would make them all pay for Mo Xingtian's death. Boom! Vast spiritual power surged through the heavens and earth. 6 10,000-foot-high beams of light spread, and the overwhelming spiritual energy condensed into a crimson cauldron. Inside this cauldron, 6 gigantic dragons of different colors roared and soared. Terrifying heat waves radiated throughout the cauldron, so intense that even space itself seemed to be collapsing, showing signs of impending destruction. Within the cauldron, Grandsong Academy headmaster sat cross-legged. A towering spiritual energy projection, over 1,000 feet high, enveloped him. This was his supreme Dharmakaya. However, under the unbearable heat, this Dharmakaya was continuously boiling, and his massive form seemed to be distorting. Ha ha ha, Grandsong. How do you like the 6 dragons burning heaven cauldron we prepared for you? Today, I want to see how long you can last inside. Outside the massive crimson cauldron, Black Dragon Supreme laughed wildly, his voice filled with unmistakable pride and killing intent. At this moment, Grandsong Academy headmaster had completely fallen into their grasp. Facing a 5th grade Supreme and 5 first-grade Supremes, this battle was already one-sided. Even though the headmaster possessed 5th grade Supreme strength, he still couldn't escape from the clutches of Black Dragon Supreme and the others. Hearing Black Dragon Supreme's laugh, a cold glint flickered in Grandsong's eyes, but he didn't respond. Instead, he focused on urging his Supreme Dharmakaya to protect his body. All he could do was endure. As long as Lord Bei Ming solved his opponents, he would be saved. Black Dragon Supreme and his group had spared no effort in their pursuit to capture him, draining all their strength. But now, the other 2 Heavenly Seed Elders from Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy were likely rushing over. All he could do now was hold on for as long as possible in the encirclement of Black Dragon Supreme and his 6 companions. Several tens of thousands of feet away, countless strong figures hovered in midair. Various leaders gazed nervously at the terrifying battle, then glanced to the distant right, where 2 figures were locked in a standoff. Luan, the leader of the Shadow Chamber of Commerce, and Ling Shi from Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. I didn't expect the Shadow Chamber of Commerce to aid Dragon Demon Palace. It seems they've been in cahoots for some time. Some of the leaders exchanged glances and whispered, "There's a powerful fluctuation of spiritual energy in Sacred Spirit City. That should be the 2 Heavenly Seed Elders from Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy being held off. The ones holding them are likely the president of Tianyuan Chamber of Commerce. Could it be that the Shadow Chamber of Commerce and Tianyuan Chamber of Commerce have allied with Dragon Demon Palace? This doesn't seem likely." Although Luan stopped Ling Shi, he didn't dare to kill her, clearly hesitating. "I think Dragon Demon Palace must have promised them some irresistible reward, which is why they agreed to make a move, but even that is limited. In this way, even if Dragon Demon Palace loses, they'll have some excuses." In the sky, Summer Tianyan, the president of 9 Summer Chamber of Commerce, watched the battle below with a grim expression. His eyes flickered with uncertainty. The Shadow Chamber of Commerce, Tianyuan Chamber of Commerce, and their own 9 Summer Chamber of Commerce were the 3 major guilds of North Tsang continent, all balancing each other. Now, these factions had suddenly allied with Dragon Demon Palace, which was troubling news for them. If Dragon Demon Palace succeeded in eliminating Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy today, it would likely dominate North Tsang continent in the future. However, despite knowing this, Xia Tianyin did not dare to choose to help the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. The Dragon Demon Palace had been plotting for a long time, even enlisting powerful figures like Wu Liang Ancestor. The outcome of the battle between Wu Liang Ancestor and the North Abyss Dragon Kuin was still undecided. If they sided with the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy and Wu Liang Ancestor emerged victorious, they would most likely face bloody retaliation. As Xia Tianyin furrowed his brow, a light voice came from the side. "He, President Xia. As for the current situation." Xia Tianyin turned to look. It was the temple master of the West Pole Temple, West Pole Supreme, who spoke with a smile, though his eyes flickered with a gleam. What does the West Pole Temple Master intend to do? In this situation, if you choose the wrong side, it could lead to utter destruction, Xia Tianyin replied with a smile. The West Pole Temple Master sighed lightly and said, if I had to choose between the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy and the Dragon Demon Palace, I would naturally lean towards the former. After all, the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy has no ambition for dominance, which would be easier for us. On the other hand, the Dragon Demon Palace has grand ambitions, and I fear that if they dominate the North Tsang continent, we will be affected as well. So, the West Pole Temple Master's intention is to help the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy? Xia Tianyin asked. The West Pole Temple Master smiled helplessly, his gaze hesitant and conflicted. Although he leaned towards the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, the situation was still unclear, and it was not the time to choose sides. And what is President Xia's intention? He asked. Xia Tianyin narrowed his eyes and slowly replied, there's no rush. The situation is at a standstill, and acting impulsively wouldn't be wise. We should wait a little longer. If the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy really can't hold on, then we'll decide whether to act. At that crucial moment, if we intervene to help, the favor we owe the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy will be greater. President Xia truly deserves to be the leader of the 9 Summer Chamber of Commerce. Even in such a situation, you are still so clear-headed. The West Pole Temple Master laughed. This is no child's play. Our foundation is in the North Tsang continent. If we don't think things through carefully, all the years of effort might go down the drain. Xia Tianyin shook his head and looked towards the towering crimson cauldron standing between heaven and earth. A deep look of wariness flashed in his eyes as he murmured. The West Pole Temple Master nodded and softly said, I hope that Headmaster Tong can hold on a bit longer. It would be best if the North Abyss Dragon Kuren arrives in time. If that happens, the Dragon Demon Palace's plans will be ruined. Buzz. As the two spoke, the distant sky suddenly distorted violently, as if a spatial portal had formed, and countless figures rushed out like locusts from within. As those people emerged from the space vortex, they saw the towering crimson cauldron and were all left dumbfounded. Mu Chun was also shocked by the sight. His expression changed drastically as he saw Headmaster Tong, trapped inside the crimson cauldron, along with the Black Dragon Supreme and others outside. Just as I thought, the Dragon Demon Palace has made its move against our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Mu Chin's heart trembled. These people were incredibly bold. The spatial vortex had been detected by the many powerful figures outside Sacred Spirit Mountain, and the Black Dragon Supreme's cold gaze swept towards Mu Chan as well. The murderous intent in his eyes was so palpable that it sent a chill down Mu Chin's spine. Huanglong, go capture that boy and take back the great Xun'er demon pillar. The Black Dragon Supreme turned his head and spoke coldly to a Dragon Demon Palace Supreme standing on the other side. The man in yellow robes nodded indifferently before stepping back. Now that the cauldron had been stabilized, even though one Supreme was missing, it would take longer to eliminate Headmaster Tong, but no changes were expected. The Great Xun'er Demon Pillar was a priceless treasure to the Dragon Demon Palace and must not be lost. Huanglong Supreme turned and stepped into the air, his supreme pressure spreading out, causing the faces of those who had just emerged from Sacred Spirit Mountain to change drastically. They hurriedly retreated as they realized that Huanglong Supreme was targeting Mu Chan. Xia Yuren's face also shifted slightly, and she quickly shouted, Mu Chan, run! Although they had witnessed Mu Chin's formidable abilities in Sacred Spirit Mountain, even Emo Xingtian was like a helpless child in the face of a true supreme, with no strength to resist. Mu Chan clenched his fists tightly, his eyes darkened. However, he did not immediately turn to flee, knowing that escaping would be useless. The Yellow Dragon Supreme hovered several hundred feet away in the sky, his yellowed pupils coldly fixed on Mu Chan. His voice, indifferent, rang out, You do have some courage. I thought you'd immediately turn tail and flee. Hand over the Great Xun'er Demon Pillar to me, and I'll give you a quicker death. The Yellow Dragon Supreme extended his hand. Mu Chan locked his gaze on the Yellow Dragon Supreme and then grinned, showing his sharp white teeth. Dream on. The Yellow Dragon Supreme's face remained impassive, as if he had anticipated Mu Chen's response. He gave a slight nod. Then I'll have to take matters into my own hands. I hope you can endure the kind of pain I will inflict. Those who fall into my grasp find that even death is something they can only wish for. As his words faded, the vast spiritual energy around him surged, the oppressive aura of a supreme being pressing down on Xia Yuran and the others, making it hard for them to breathe. With a single step, the yellow dragon supreme was ready to strike. Whoosh! However, just as he made his move, a sharp sound of air splitting echoed across the sky. A torrent of sword chi tore through the air, resembling 1,000 swords fired simultaneously, raining down upon him. A mere trick, the yellow dragon supreme sneered. Without even turning his head, he waved his sleeve, sending a wave of spiritual energy soaring into the sky. The sword chi was shattered in an instant. Swish! A shadow sped toward Mu Chen, landing beside him. It was Luo Li, her face cold as she stared at the yellow dragon supreme. Her slender hand gripped the Luo god sword, and dark red blood quietly flowed down the blade, staining it. Two of you together? The yellow dragon supreme slightly tilted his head, then smiled. His smile chilling and detached. A pair of doomed lovers? Fine, I'll make your wish come true. In the sky, the killing intent surged like a tangible force, overwhelming and suffocating as it descended upon the pair standing side by side. Despite the pressure of facing a supreme being, neither Mu Chen nor Luo Li showed any fear. Their poise drew quiet admiration from the onlookers, but it was soon replaced with a sense of regret. The current situation truly seemed like a deadlock. Mu Chen felt the overwhelming killing intent, his eyes dark with determination as he stared at the yellow dragon supreme. His hand clenched tightly. He too felt an immense danger, a level of threat far beyond what he had faced against Emo Xingtian. After all, compared to the yellow dragon supreme, Emo Xingtian was nothing but a mere shadow. Although the yellow dragon supreme was only a first-grade supreme, a supreme was still a supreme. Regardless of rank, to deal with Mu Chen was like crushing an ant. You! Mu Chen gritted his teeth and glanced at Luo Li, trying to get her to leave. It was too dangerous here. But before he could speak, Luo Li's beautiful eyes shot him a stern look. Her slender brows furrowed slightly, and for the first time, there was a flicker of anger in her face, but she remained silent. She just stared at him, as though warning him not to speak another word. Mu Chen sighed helplessly, reached out, and took her delicate hand in his. Shrugging, he said, "Fine, I was wrong. We'll face them together. Who cares about some so-called supreme? Let's cut him down. However, the situation is tricky. You must listen to me." Mu Chen looked at Luo Li seriously. Luo Li hesitated for a moment, then nodded lightly. She wasn't a temperamental person. She just didn't like it when Mu Chen always pushed her aside, going off to get beaten up while she watched helplessly. But she understood the bigger picture. The current situation was indeed extremely unfavorable for them. The Yellow Dragon Supreme is too strong. But precisely because he's so strong, we have a slim chance. A person like him, in this kind of situation, will always have some reservations. He won't immediately use his full power on us. Our chance lies in his overconfidence. Mu Chen's black eyes gleamed with a cold light. His voice, soft yet firm, reached Luo Li's ears. So, I'll make the first move. You have the Luo God Sword. I'll try my best to create an opening for you. When the time comes, it will be your turn. Remember, we only have one shot. If it doesn't work, Luo Li gently bit her lip, clearly aware that Mu Chen had once again taken the most dangerous task upon himself. But this time, she didn't argue. She knew that the only weapon they had that could pose a threat to the Yellow Dragon Supreme was the Luo God Sword in her hand. As for Mu Chen's so-called Great Sumeru Demon Pillar, while powerful, it was far too unruly. Right now, Mu Chen couldn't control it. Be careful, Luo Li whispered softly. Mu Chen nodded, saying no more. His gaze shifted to the relaxed Huanglong Supreme, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. If the situation worsened, he feared he would have no choice but to forcefully awaken Nine Nether. Although this would disrupt her evolution, it was still better than all three of them dying here. After all, he had a bloodline bond with Nine Nether. If he died at the hands of Huanglong Supreme, Nine Nether would not escape her fate either. Have you two decided how to deal with me? Huanglong Supreme asked with a faint smile, his eyes gleaming with a hint of mockery as he looked at the two of them. He wasn't concerned that Mu Chun seemed to be discussing some strategy with Luo Li. It was as if a hunter paid no attention to the struggles of the two rabbits trapped in a cage. The power of a supreme allowed him absolute control. Boom. Mu Chun remained expressionless, his hand clenched into a fist. Black lightning surged from his body, raising his stature by an inch. Two lightning patterns appeared on his chest, activating the two-rune thunder god body. At the same time, an overwhelming malevolent force erupted from his body, the power of the great Xun'er demon pillar coursing through him. Mu Chun was fully aware of the terrifying gap between him and Huanglong Supreme, so he dared not hold back. All his strength and techniques were unleashed without reservation. The fluctuations around Mu Chun grew stronger, his robes billowing, causing many of the powerful figures around him to react in surprise. This young man, who had defeated Mo Xingtian, certainly had abilities worth admiring. Xia Yuran clenched her jade-like hands, watching Mu Chun, who was about to clash with Huanglong Supreme. Her eyes were filled with anxiety. She then turned to Xia Tianyin beside her, saying, "Father, are we really going to do nothing? If the Dragon Demon Palace continues to suppress the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, it won't be good for us, will it?" Xia Tianyin glanced over at Mu Chun, then smiled and said, "Are you worried about that kid?" Xia Yuran's face flushed slightly, and with a hint of embarrassment, she retorted, "I'm talking about something serious." Xia Tianyin sighed. Now is not the time to intervene. The Dragon Demon Palace is well prepared this time. We need to think more carefully. After all, one misstep, and our 9 Summer Chamber of Commerce might face a devastating blow. Xia Yuran fell silent for a moment. Both the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy and the Dragon Demon Palace were powerful forces on the North Tsang continent. Even their 9 Summer Chamber of Commerce, a top-tier force, could not compare. Don't worry. That kid helped you out in Sacred Spirit Mountain. I'm not someone who forgets kindness. If it really comes to it, I will step in to help him escape, Xia Tianyin said slowly. Xia Yuran sighed deeply. Given the current situation, it seemed that was the only way forward. Buzz. When Mu Chin's aura reached its peak, his body shot forward like an arrow. The great Xun'er demon pillar soared into the sky and, within Mu Chin's virtual embrace, charged at Huanglong Supreme with a fierce wave of malevolent energy. The demon pillar, carrying dark shadows and malevolent power, descended, but Huanglong Supreme remained calm, showing no sign of evading. He simply extended one hand and raised it, allowing the demon pillar to crash into his palm. Boom! A visible shockwave rippled outward, distorting the space itself. However, Huanglong Supreme's figure, standing in the sky, remained unmoved. Despite the massive disparity between his frame and the enormous demon pillar, his slender form contained a terrifying force capable of shaking the heavens. The great Xun'er demon pillar in your hands is truly wasted, Huanglong Supreme said with a faint smile. He then swiped his hand, sending the pillar flying with a single strike. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang through the air, and the massive great Xun'er demon pillar was sent hurtling away by Huanglong Supreme's palm. Mu Chun, still holding the pillar, was jolted by the impact and immediately spat out blood. His black eyes flared with a savage glint. Without hesitation, he charged forward like a madman, swinging the demon pillar and smashing it down toward Huanglong Supreme. Clang! Clang! Huanglong Supreme stood motionless, casually swatting the demon pillar away with each strike. Each blow that landed on the pillar erupted with a deafening sound, causing the pillar to tremble violently. At the rear, Luo Li clenched her red lips tightly, her jade-like hand gripping the Luo god's sword with all her strength. Crimson blood continually flowed down the blade, and at that moment, the Luo god's sword emitted a faint crimson glow. On the blade, a blood-red rune seemed to be gradually fading, sending waves of chilling sword energy around her. Even the very space was being torn apart. Clang! That sharp yet unsettling sound still echoed through the sky. Everyone watched as Mu Chen repeatedly launched attacks, showing no fear of death, but with no effect. His injuries only grew more severe. They couldn't help but click their tongues in awe. This kid really had no regard for his life, daring to fight against a supreme powerhouse like this. If this continued, he might be struck dead by the backlash. Clearly, the Huanglong Supreme was also intrigued. He smiled, watching Mu Chen charge forward again and again, as if he were observing a mouse's futile struggle. Boom! Mu Chen's eyes turned bloodshot as he charged forward once more. With a roar, the great Xun'er demon pillar slammed down again at the Huanglong Supreme. His lips were stained with blood, appearing exceptionally scarlet and piercing to the eye. Enough already, the Huanglong Supreme chuckled, his eyes filled with ruthless cruelty. Then, the light in his palm began to condense, and with a swift motion, he slapped his palm heavily against the incoming great Xun'er demon pillar. At the moment of contact, a cold gleam suddenly surged in Mu Chen's eyes. Within his qi, the seal page erupted with violet light patterns. A beam of purple light shot out, coursing over the great Xun'er demon pillar and into Huanglong Supreme's body, following the path of his hand. The smile on the Huanglong Supreme's face instantly froze. He suddenly felt the vast and boundless spiritual power within his body rapidly fading, his overwhelming authority dissipating in an instant. It was as though it had been sealed. Boom! The great Xun'er demon pillar struck Huanglong Supreme's body with terrifying force. A tremendous explosion rang out, and then, to the shock of the onlookers, they saw Huanglong Supreme's body fly up into the sky. Luo Li. Mu Chen's hands were cracked as he let out a loud shout. In the distance, the young girl leapt into the air, her body soaring. The long sword in her hand was now exceptionally crimson. A blood-red rune seemed to quietly dissolve into the blood on the sword. Buzz! A sword hum echoed across the sky. The sound of the sword rang out, shaking the very fabric of space. Countless people were stunned as they saw the slender-waisted, stunning girl with silver hair raised high, her beautiful face icy cold, as she thrust out with her sword. The crimson sword burst forth with dazzling bloodlight, and a blood-red sword beam shot out like a river of blood. As the sword energy tore through the space, it left a rift in its wake, and with sharp inhales from the crowd, the sword mercilessly cleaved down upon the Huanglong Supreme, who had been sent flying by Mu Chen's demon pillar. Boom! The blood light spread across the sky, and the sword energy howled through the air. The space seemed to become riddled with holes. In this moment, the entire world was stunned. All the powerful figures stared in wide-eyed disbelief. The dazzling crimson sword light burst forth from the heavens like a blood-red firework. Amidst the beauty, it exuded an aura that sent chills down the spine. Everyone was left speechless, staring at the scene before them. This unexpected turn of events had caught everyone off guard. No one had expected the Huanglong Supreme, who should have had absolute control over the situation, to be struck down first by Mu Chen's demon pillar and then hit head-on by Luo Li's sudden explosion of incredible sword light. The blood-red sword light gradually dissipated in the sky under the gazes of astonished onlookers, and soon, a figure reappeared in their sight. As the figure appeared, the air was filled with gasps of shock, one after another, echoing endlessly. That figure was none other than Huanglong Supreme, but now his face was incredibly grim. His clothes had torn open at the chest, revealing a bloodline from his lower abdomen to his throat. Huanglong Supreme had been wounded. Countless astonished gazes turned to the stunning girl in black, standing high in the air. She had actually injured a first-grade Supreme with her heaven-reaching stage strength? What an incredible divine sword! Xia Tianyan's gaze locked onto the Luo god's sword tightly gripped in Luo Li's delicate hand. A flicker of surprise passed through his eyes, and with a serious expression, he said, "I can sense a dangerous aura emanating from this sword. If it were to fall into the hands of a first-grade Supreme, even I would have to treat it with extreme caution. This had to be a divine artifact, and likely not just any ordinary one among divine artifacts. What sort of background does this girl have? To be able to wield such a powerful divine artifact, Xia Tianyan muttered in surprise. A divine artifact. Even the 9 Summer Chamber of Commerce couldn't get their hands on one. To think it had appeared in the hands of a student from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy was enough to make him feel a little envious. But as envious as he was, Xia Tianyan understood one thing. Any girl wielding such a priceless treasure must have an extremely strong background. Anyone foolish enough to try to lay a hand on her would likely pay a heavy price. Beside him, Xia Yuran shook her head, also surprised. Though she knew Luo Li, she hadn't expected this calm, stunning girl to possess such power. Still, she's too weak to fully unleash the sword's power. Otherwise, with one holding a demon pillar and the other a divine sword, even the Huanglong Supreme would likely be in serious trouble, Xia Tianyan said regretfully. And now, the Huanglong Supreme is probably losing his mind. Indeed, the Huanglong Supreme was on the verge of madness. He looked down at the wounds on his chest, his body trembling uncontrollably. His face burned with shame. While this injury wasn't fatal to him, it was a slap in the face, especially in front of so many powerful beings from the North Tsang continent. He could already imagine how much of a laughingstock he would become once this incident spread. A dignified supreme-level existence. Yet he was wounded so badly by 2 juniors in the heaven-reaching stage. His earlier carelessness had now cost him all his face. 2 little bastards. The Huanglong Supreme's voice trembled with fury as he glared at Mu Chun and Luo Li, hatred burning in his eyes. He wanted nothing more than to tear them apart. Today, I'll make sure you wish you were never born. The Huanglong Supreme roared, his figure shooting forward like a flash, appearing before Luo Li in an instant. With a flick of his finger, the space in front of him shattered violently, sending a terrifying ripple of destructive energy toward Luo Li at lightning speed. Swoosh! Just as the deadly ripple was about to reach Luo Li, a dragon-shaped shadow rushed past. Mu Chun grabbed Luo Li's slim waist and, in one swift motion, pulled her out of the ripple's path. You little bastard! Can't even save yourself, and you're thinking of rescuing others? The Huanglong Supreme sneered, raising his finger again. A thick, liquid-like beam of light shot from his fingertip, tearing through the space and slamming into Mu Chen's back. Pfft! The blow landed heavily, and Mu Chun spat out a mouthful of blood. He held onto Luo Li, his body being violently thrown back 1,000 meters. His back was a bloody mess. If it weren't for his small success in the Thunder God body, this attack would have pierced him straight through. Mu Chun. Blood from the corner of Mu Chen's mouth dripped onto Luo Li's silver-like long hair, creating a stark contrast. But she couldn't care about that right now. She looked up at the pale Mu Chen, her heart tightening in pain, her teeth sinking into her red lips. I'm not dead yet, Mu Chun forced a smile, though his body felt like it had been shattered. The pain was unbearable. Truly, this was the power of a supreme. A single serious attack could leave them utterly helpless. He had clearly underestimated the strength of a supreme. Even with this seal page, helping him temporarily seal the Huanglong Supreme's spiritual energy, they still couldn't inflict any real harm. You're right, you're not dead, because I'll make sure your life is worse than death. A cold, emotionless voice came from behind them. The Huanglong Supreme's eyes gleamed with malice as he raised his finger once again. Luo Li gritted her silver teeth and tightly gripped the Luo God sword. She ran her finger along the sword's edge, forming a seal with her hand. Immediately, a complex, blood-red rune appeared on the sword's blade. She was about to wipe away the rune, fully unlocking the Luo God sword. However, just as she was about to do so, Mu Chun suddenly grabbed the sword's body. The sharp aura from the blade sliced his hand open, causing blood to spill. Let go. Luo Li exclaimed urgently. Don't do it, trust me. I'm not that easy to kill. Mu Chun gritted his teeth. He knew Luo Li had some formidable techniques. If she used them, she might be able to stop the Huanglong Supreme. But the cost would be that Luo Li would leave him prematurely, and Mu Chun didn't want that. Luo Li understood what Mu Chun was thinking. She loved the feeling of being with him, but in her heart, his safety always came first. If sacrificing those feelings could ensure his safety, She would do it without hesitation. Trust me. Luo Li clenched her silver teeth, her gaze fixed on Mu Chen. In the end, she released her hand seals and nodded lightly, saying, "If you can't handle it, I'll step in." Her words were firm, making it clear that she wouldn't let Mu Chen change her decision. Mu Chen smiled helplessly, his body moving as a shadow of a giant dragon appeared beneath his feet. He surged forward like a ghost, and a light beam zipped past his ear. The wind from it left a cut across his face, even though it had missed him. In the distance, an extreme surge of spiritual energy suddenly erupted into the sky. Those watching turned their gaze to where Luo Li and Ling Shi were. To their surprise, a shocking battle had broken out there. Ling Shi, who had been calmly facing Luo Li earlier, now had a frosty expression. Her movements became vicious, unleashing a barrage of terrifying attacks that forced Luo Li into a defensive retreat. "Get away!" Ling Shi's face was as cold as ice, her beautiful eyes flashing with killing intent. Luo Li was startled by the sudden, overwhelming killing intent from Ling Shi. He glanced at Mu Chen, who was frantically fleeing from the Huanglong Supreme's attack, then sighed and said, "Ling Shi, wouldn't it be better if we just pretend like before? There's no need for violence. If we do this, neither of us will benefit." Boom. Before he finished speaking, Ling Shi raised her jade hand. The sky rippled, and countless rays of light shot into the air, forming a massive red spirit array in the sky. Within it, a towering volcano rapidly materialized. "Get away!" Ling Shi shouted coldly again. With a wave of her sleeve, the massive volcano erupted, releasing an earth-shaking wave of power. Magma shot into the air, transforming into an enormous magma serpent that charged directly at Luo Li with a ferocious speed. Luo Li's expression shifted slightly. Not daring to delay, he called out in a low voice, and a giant spiritual energy figure appeared behind him. It resembled a colossal titan, its breath transforming into wind and clouds. A giant hand, as solid as reality, slammed down to collide with the magma serpent head-on. Faced with Ling Shi's rage, Luo Li had no choice but to summon his supreme Dharma body. Meanwhile, Mu Chen was becoming more and more desperate. The Huanglong Supreme's attacks were coming faster and faster, and Mu Chen's injuries were piling up, blood flowing freely. In his arms, Luo Li watched the scene, her eyes reddening. Her hand, which gripped the Luo God's sword, trembled slightly. "That was a good dodge. Are you going to dodge again this time?" The Huanglong Supreme sneered, stretching out all 10 of his fingers and suddenly pressing them down into the air. Whoosh! Whoosh! As his fingers pressed down, dozens of terrifying light beams shattered the space and surrounded Mu Chen within 1,000 zhang radius. There was no way to avoid such an attack. Mu Chen gritted his teeth and sent a black tower flying from his hand. It expanded rapidly, eventually forming a giant 9-story pagoda that enveloped both him and Luo Li. Bang! Bang! The light beams relentlessly pounded the pagoda. Despite the defensive power of the pagoda, cracks began to appear under the tremendous pressure. Finally, with a loud crash, the pagoda, Mu Chen's strongest defensive move, was shattered. "You can die now, you little pests." The Huanglong Supreme sneered, his figure suddenly surging forward. A massive spiritual hand formed behind him, stretching thousands of feet wide, and with a mighty swing, it descended toward Mu Chen and Luo Li, smashing the space beneath it to pieces. The Huanglong Supreme had clearly had enough of playing around and was determined to kill them both. As the 9th-grade pagoda exploded, Mu Chen coughed up more blood. In his arms, Luo Li's Luo God sword once again glowed with an ancient, cryptic blood-red rune. Mu Chen was extremely weak. He sensed a terrifying fluctuation coming from above him and could only smile bitterly. He shook his head at Luo Li, raised his hand, and was about to forcefully summon the evolving 9 nether. Buzz. However, just as Mu Chen was about to forcibly summon it, he did not notice that the 9th-level pagoda, shattered by the Huanglong Supreme, suddenly erupted with dazzling light. The beams of light intertwined and enveloped Mu Chen, and within that brilliance, there seemed to be the figure of a woman slowly materializing. As the figure formed, A soft and gentle voice suddenly echoed throughout the heavens and earth. The voice was extraordinarily tender, yet it contained a trace of fury and an icy coldness that made the world chill in an instant.